A U.S. Army veteran and his German Shepherd stepped into a small diner to escape the freezing winter night. Moments later, a 35-year-old woman on crutches entered, guiding a silent 12-year-old boy by the hand. Every table turned away, every glance avoided them. When they finally stopped in front of the veteran, the boy stared at the floor as the woman whispered, "Is it okay if we sit here?" What the soldier noticed next, within the next 60 seconds, would uncover a truth so dark it would test his faith, his past, and everything he thought he'd left behind after the war. This is a story about winter, survival, and the family no one expects. Before we begin, please subscribe to the channel and tell us where you're watching from in the comments. Enjoy the story. Snow pressed sideways along the sidewalks, driven by a winter wind that scraped sound from the city and left only the hiss of tires and the ache of cold. Inside the diner, warmth pooled beneath yellow lights, pretending the outside didn't exist. The veteran came in first, stamping snow from his boots with a habit learned long before this city, long before civilian life. He was 45, tall and broad-shouldered, with the kind of weight that came from years of carrying more than his share. His beard was trimmed but never neat, dark with strands of gray that had arrived early and stayed. His face was angular, high cheekbones, a squared jaw, a thin scar near the left eyebrow that looked old enough to belong to another lifetime. He wore a faded field jacket zipped high against the cold, gloves tucked into one pocket, posture straight without trying. People moved aside instinctively, not out of fear exactly, but recognition. This was a man who had seen things and did not explain them. At his heel walked a German Shepherd, sable-coated and powerful, about 7 years old, eyes amber and alert. The dog's name was Rex. He moved without pulling the leash, head level, tail low, scanning the room as if the walls might change their minds and turn hostile. Rex had learned patience overseas, learned to read air and breath and intent, and he never forgot. They chose a booth near the wall. The veteran slid in, back to the room, the way he always did. Rex sat between the table and the aisle, not blocking, just present, ears forward, gaze drifting to the door every time it opened. The waitress, Sarah, paused with her coffee pot. She was in her late 50s, short and sturdy, with steel-gray hair pinned into a bun that never moved and skin browned by years of steam and sun through diner windows. Her eyes were kind but efficient. She nodded once, a wordless agreement that he would be left alone unless he asked. Then the bell over the door chimed again. The woman came in slowly, leaning on aluminum crutches that looked too cold to touch. She was 35, tall but worn down by effort, her build once athletic now narrowed by months of strain. Her hair, dark brown and cut just past her shoulders, was pulled into a loose tie that had given up hours ago. Her skin was pale with winter, lips dry and cracked, eyes the color of wet asphalt, steady, watchful, exhausted. She wore a heavy coat that didn't quite fit, one sleeve hanging longer than the other, and beneath it jeans worn thin at the knees. Her left leg ended above the knee, the absence unhidden, practical, undeniable. With her was a boy of 12, slender, dark-haired, his jacket zipped to his chin as if the world might slip inside if he let it. His hands stayed buried in his pockets. He kept his eyes on the floor, counting tiles, memorizing patterns, anything but faces. They asked for a table. One booth shook its head without looking. Another pretended not to hear. A family shifted coats and bodies to close space. Sarah hesitated, glancing toward the back, then to the floor. The woman thanked her anyway, voice calm, practiced, the sound of someone used to refusing her own needs before others could. She moved on, the crutches tapping softly, the boy a half step behind, careful not to bump anyone, careful not to exist too loudly. At the booth near the wall, the veteran felt the change before he saw it. Rex's ears rose a fraction. Not a growl, not tension, just attention. The woman stopped. She did not plead. She did not apologize. "Would you mind," she asked, measured and quiet, "if we shared?" The veteran looked at her, then at the boy, who stared at the floor as if it might open and take him somewhere easier. He shifted his plate aside and nodded once. "Sit," he said, and slid the bench back with his boot. Rex stood, repositioned himself closer to the boy, body angled, not blocking, not touching, simply there. Relief crossed the woman's face too quickly, like a reflex she tried to hide. She maneuvered into the booth with practiced care. The boy sat stiffly, hands still tucked away, shoulders tight. Sarah returned, coffee already poured, and set water glasses down without comment. She glanced at the crutches, then away, dignity intact. They exchanged names. The woman's was Anna. She thanked him again, then stopped, jaw tightening as if she'd said enough. The boy did not offer his. Rex lowered himself to the floor, eyes flicking to the door each time the bell chimed, tail still. The veteran ordered soup and bread without asking, then pushed the basket toward Anna. She hesitated only a second before accepting, fingers steady, pride intact. As they ate, the veteran watched in the periphery the way soldiers do. Anna kept her back straight, her gaze outward, measuring exits, listening for footsteps. She apologized when the spoon clinked too loudly, when the boy shifted, when nothing at all had happened. The boy ate quickly, then stopped, scanning the room before taking another bite, as if expecting interruption. Rex's presence eased him just enough that his shoulders dropped a centimeter, then another. The veteran felt something settle into place, an old weight he recognized. Not danger, not yet, but pattern. He followed the boy's line of sight and noticed what the child would not meet: eyes. Every adult face slid past him. The boy tracked the floor, the table edge, the seam in his sleeve, anything to avoid being seen. When the veteran caught his reflection in the window, he understood. The boy had learned that looking up invited judgment, questions, consequences. And that, the veteran knew, was never taught by winter alone. The heater hummed beneath the counter, a tired sound that filled pauses without quite warming them, and the booth held its own quiet gravity. Anna ate carefully, as if each movement had been rehearsed to avoid drawing attention. Her apologies slipped out between bites, sorry for the space, sorry for the noise, sorry for the inconvenience, each one small and automatic, the reflex of someone who had learned to smooth edges before they could cut. The veteran listened without interrupting, hands folded around his mug, eyes moving only when necessary. Rex lay with his chest to the floor and his head lifted, amber eyes steady. He watched the door, then the boy, then the door again, a gentle metronome of vigilance. Sarah passed once more with a fresh pot, her shoulders rounded from years of leaning into work, her gray bun held with a clip shaped like a sunflower that had lost its paint. She glanced at Anna's crutches and then at the boy's clenched jaw, said nothing, and left the pot on the warmer as if that were kindness enough for now. Anna spoke about the cold first, how it had arrived early this year, how the wind found seams in coats and arguments alike. She talked about buses running late, about sidewalks that hadn't been cleared. When the veteran nodded, she relaxed a fraction, then added, almost as an aside, that they couldn't go back to where they'd been. The words were measured, not dramatic, but they landed with weight. She did not say why. She did not say where. The veteran did not ask. He recognized the cadence, the way people circle truth when it hurts to touch it head-on. Rex's ears tipped forward at the change in tone, then settled again, patient. The boy startled when the bell chimed. It was a small flinch, quick and contained, but it traveled through his shoulders and into his hands, which tightened around the edge of the table. He glanced at the door, then back to the floor, breath shallow. The veteran noted the timing, the pattern. Every entrance registered as a threat until proven otherwise. He had worn that posture himself once, years after coming home, when fireworks felt like artillery and sleep was a negotiation. He shifted his boot slightly so Rex's flank touched the boy's knee, just enough pressure to ground. The dog did not move his head. He breathed. Sarah returned with bowls of soup that steamed and smelled of onions and thyme. Up close, she looked older than she sounded, her skin creased by smiles and the kind of fatigue that settles in bones. "On the house," she said to Anna, tone brisk, as if refusing argument preemptively. Anna's eyes shone, then hardened, and she nodded once. "Thank you," she said, and did not add, "sorry." The veteran watched that choice with interest. They ate. The city outside kept its distance. The veteran asked the boy about school without pushing, a neutral question, the sort that could be declined. The boy shrugged, eyes on the rim of his bowl. "We're between places," Anna said, before the silence could stretch. The veteran accepted the cover. He asked Sarah for bread. She brought extra, setting the basket closer to the boy than to anyone else, then drifted back to her register. It was only when Anna stood to use the restroom that the veteran noticed what wasn't there. She rose with practiced balance, adjusted the crutches, checked the floor for slick patches, and went. The boy remained seated, posture tight, hands in his lap now. The veteran's gaze dropped to the floor beside the booth, then to the neighboring chairs, then to the rack by the door. No bags, no purse. No backpack slung under the table or hooked on a chair leg. He scanned the counter, the window ledge, the coat hooks. Nothing. Not even a shopping bag with a change of clothes. Not even a folded scarf that wasn't already being worn. Rex noticed the shift in the veteran's attention and lifted his head higher, eyes following the man's line of sight. The dog's tail tapped once against the tile, not a warning, just acknowledgement. The veteran leaned back, letting the realization settle without letting it show. He thought of the way Anna had counted steps, of how lightly she traveled, of how the boy carried himself as if weight were an enemy. People who planned to return somewhere carried things. People who didn't traveled light or not at all. When Anna returned, she paused at the booth, eyes flicking to the floor as if expecting to trip over something that should have been there. The veteran met her gaze briefly and then looked away, giving her the courtesy of time. Outside, the wind rattled the windows. Inside, the soup cooled. The bell chimed again, and the boy flinched less this time, his shoulder brushing Rex's with a small, unconscious trust. The veteran did not say what he had seen. He asked if they wanted more bread. Anna nodded. Sarah came, set the basket down, and as she turned, squeezed Anna's shoulder once, quick, firm, human. The veteran watched the boy take another bite, watched his eyes lift just enough to register faces without meeting them, and understood the shape of what lay ahead without naming it. Some truths announce themselves. Others wait to be discovered in the empty spaces where a life's ordinary clutter should be. The soup bowls were nearly empty when Anna spoke again, her voice steadier now, as if warmth had loosened something she'd kept braced. She didn't begin with tragedy. She began with logistics, dates, streets, weather, facts arranged neatly like tools on a table. The accident, she said, happened last winter, not far from here. A side street iced over, a car sliding too fast. She described headlights blooming white, the sound of metal folding, the way time stretched and then snapped. She said it plainly, without drama, as if the words themselves had been sanded smooth by repetition. She lost her leg, she said, because the door crushed it. The doctors tried. They couldn't save it. The veteran listened, elbows on the table, hands clasped. He watched how she spoke, not what she said, how. Her eyes stayed level when she mentioned the crash, her breathing even. There was no hitch when she described pain, no blur when she spoke of the hospital. She had learned this story the way soldiers learn reports: remove the unnecessary, present only what cannot be argued. Rex's ears angled toward her, then back to the door, his presence a quiet anchor. The boy kept his gaze down, tracing the rim of his bowl with one finger until it squeaked. He flinched at the sound and stopped. The veteran had seen enough wrecks to know their chaos. People remember fragments, glass in hair, the taste of blood, a voice shouting from nowhere. Anna's account was too linear, too clean. He noted what she didn't say. No mention of speed estimates, no confusion about angles, no admission of fault or fear. When he asked where the impact landed, she answered quickly, too quickly, naming a point that didn't match the injury she described. It wasn't a lie, not exactly. It was an omission shaped like self-defense. She glanced at the boy, then away. It was complicated, she said, and that was the first crack. The veteran let it be. He had learned that pressure creates resistance, and resistance hides truth. He asked about recovery instead: physical therapy, prosthetics, insurance. At the last word, her jaw tightened. She nodded once. There was coverage, she said. Enough, they told me. The way she said "they" mattered. Sarah drifted past, wiping the counter with a rag that had seen better days. Up close, her eyes were a faded blue, sharp beneath tired lids. She had been listening without appearing to, a skill honed by years of overhearing lives between orders. She set down a plate of cornbread, glanced at the boy, and smiled. A small thing, practiced but sincere. Cold like this makes everything ache, she said, and moved on. The veteran asked about Anna's husband then, not directly, but as one asks about weather, casual, non-threatening. She stiffened. Her ex-husband, she corrected, the word cut clean. She gave his name. It landed with a dull thud in the veteran's chest, a sound he recognized before he understood why. He didn't react. He nodded, filed it away, asked how long they'd been apart. Long enough, she said. Long enough for habits to harden. The boy's finger resumed its careful tracing, the squeak returning, softer this time. Rex shifted closer, the weight of him steady and warm. The veteran excused himself to the counter, paid quietly, and returned without comment. He took a breath, then another, searching his memory not for certainty, but for context. The name tugged at something old, an article perhaps, or a case mentioned in passing when he'd been transitioning out, when he'd done contract work that brushed the edges of civilian investigations. Insurance fraud, maybe. An inquiry that went nowhere, the kind that starts loud and ends quiet when paper proves flexible and time does the rest. He sat back down. Anna watched him, alert now, her composure reassembling piece by piece. He did not accuse. He asked about paperwork, about delays, about letters that never arrived. She answered carefully, too carefully. When he asked who handled the claim, she said a firm name, then stopped herself and added a qualifier, used to handle. The veteran caught the correction. He asked about police reports. She said there were some. He asked about follow-up. She shook her head. The boy's shoulders rose, then fell, as if he'd been holding breath he didn't know he had. The veteran spoke at last, choosing his words like stepping stones across thin ice. He said accidents sometimes wear disguises. He said systems fail people who don't shout. He said he had heard the name before, not here, not recently. He said it without weight, but the room felt heavier for it. Anna's eyes sharpened. "Where?" she asked. He shrugged. "News," he said. "A while back." It was enough. The truth doesn't need volume. It needs air. Rex stood and stretched, nails ticking softly on tile, then sat again, eyes on the door. Outside, a patrol car passed, lights washing the window blue for a heartbeat. The boy watched the color fade and didn't flinch this time. Anna exhaled, a sound that carried both fear and relief. "I didn't plan to tell anyone," she said, not quite to the veteran. "But plans change." He nodded. Plans always do. He did not name the suspicion yet. He did not press the wound. He let the first shape of it hang between them, an accident that did not behave like one, a name that refused to stay buried. In the quiet after, the veteran recognized the feeling clearly now. Not danger, not yet, but the unmistakable outline of a case that had been opened, mishandled, and quietly closed. The veteran waited until the diner thinned and the snow softened to a steady fall before he moved, timing learned from years of choosing moments that didn't announce themselves. He asked Sarah for the phone behind the counter. She handed it over without comment, her gaze steady, her lined face unreadable but attentive. The kind of woman who knew when not to ask questions because answers arrived eventually. He dialed the hospital Anna had named, the one she'd learned to pronounce like a password. The clerk who answered sounded young and careful, a woman with a voice trained to be polite under pressure. He gave his name, not his history, and asked for records verification under Anna's authorization, which Anna provided with a nod that looked like surrender. Paperwork moved slowly at first, then faster, the way it does when something catches. He heard the click of keys, a pause too long to be procedural, then a cleared throat. Dates didn't align. A revision stamp appeared where one shouldn't exist. A note had been amended weeks after discharge, the phrasing smoothed, the cause of injury narrowed to fit a clean narrative. The veteran thanked the clerk and hung up, the weight of it settling in his chest not as anger, but as confirmation. Rex stood and repositioned, nails whispering on tile, eyes flicking to the door as if the night outside had learned their names. Anna listened as the veteran explained what the hospital had found, her composure unraveling in small, precise ways. The way her fingers tightened on the crutch grips, the way she leaned back as if bracing against a wave she'd been outrunning. "They told me it was normal," she said, not pleading, just stating a fact she'd been handed and taught to carry. Then, quietly, she added what she had avoided before. There was a policy, substantial, taken out months before the crash, listing her and her son as beneficiaries, the premiums paid by someone else. She said his name once and did not repeat it. The veteran didn't ask her to. The boy had gone still, the earlier fidget gone, his eyes fixed on a knot in the wood table. When he spoke, it was with the brittle clarity of a child repeating something overheard and never meant for him. "He said," the boy began, then stopped, swallowed, and tried again. "He said if winter passed, things would be easier, that people get tired, that accidents happen." The sentence fell apart at the end, and Rex moved closer, the solid warmth of him grounding the boy's shaking knee. The veteran felt the room narrow to essentials. He did not touch the boy. He did not interrupt. He let silence do its work, because silence had become evidence now, each pause a corroboration. Outside, a truck slowed and idled, tires crunching. Rex's head lifted, ears angling, then settled when the sound moved on. The veteran made another call, this one to an old contact whose face he pictured without effort. A man in his early 50s with a broken nose that had never been set right, salt and pepper stubble, and eyes that missed nothing. A former investigator who'd learned patience the hard way after a case he believed in evaporated under pressure. The man answered with a tired laugh and listened without interrupting. "I remember the name," he said at last, voice roughened by coffee and years of disappointment. "Insurance angle. Never stuck." He offered to pull what he could, quietly. When the call ended, Anna exhaled a breath she'd been rationing. Sarah returned with coffee she hadn't been asked for, and a slice of pie set down in front of the boy like a promise. She brushed crumbs from the counter with deliberate care and pretended not to hear the things she had already understood. The veteran watched the door again, a habit that now had purpose beyond comfort. He noticed a shape across the street, a man lingering under the awning of a closed hardware store. Average height, heavy coat zipped to the chin, beanie pulled low. The man looked away when the veteran's gaze held too long, but not before lifting a phone as if to check the time. The veteran didn't point. He didn't alarm. He filed the detail and waited. Minutes later, the same figure crossed the street, slowed near the window, and kept walking. Rex's ears rose. His tail remained still. The veteran felt the old calculation click into place, the calm that arrives when uncertainty resolves into trajectory. He leaned in and spoke softly, choosing words that wouldn't echo. "Someone's looking," he said, not accusing, just informing. Anna followed his eyes, saw the empty sidewalk where a presence had just been, and nodded once. She had known this day would come. She just hadn't known it would arrive wrapped in warmth and pie and the steady breathing of a dog. The veteran paid again, this time without argument, and stood. He did not promise safety. He promised attention, which was the more honest thing. As they moved toward the door, the bell chimed, and the boy startled less than before, his hand brushing Rex's fur with unconscious trust. Outside, the cold took them back, sharper now, purposeful, and across the street the hardware store awning was empty, which told the veteran everything he needed to know. The man they feared was no longer waiting for chance. He was actively looking. The storm arrived without ceremony, the kind that turns a city into a held breath, snow thickening the air until distance collapses and sound feels swallowed. Wind drove flakes sideways, piling them against doors and curbs, erasing tracks almost as soon as they were made. Inside the diner, lights glowed like a small promise, but the windows rattled with each gust, reminding everyone that winter had the final say. The veteran chose his moment carefully. He had learned long ago that storms compress people into their truest shapes. Fear grows louder. Arrogance seeks shortcuts. He did not ask Anna to move. He asked her to stay visible. Visibility, he said quietly, could be protection when paired with attention. Rex stood close, his thick sable coat dusted white from earlier trips outside, muscles coiled beneath fur that had been brushed but never prettied. The dog was 7 and carried himself like an older thing, patient, deliberate, loyal to patterns that kept people alive. Sarah locked the door once the rush thinned, flipping the sign to closed with a decisive wrist. Her shoulders were square, despite the ache the cold always pulled from her joints. Gray bun unbudged, eyes sharp beneath the soft hum of fatigue. "Storm's not letting up," she said, practical as a ledger. She kept the lights on. She kept the coffee hot. She did not ask why the veteran positioned himself where he could see both the door and the windows. Across the street, the hardware store awning sagged under accumulating snow. A figure materialized and vanished again. The same average height, the same heavy coat zipped high, beanie low over the brow. The veteran did not stare. He watched reflections instead, the ghosted movements in glass, the way Rex's ears tracked what the eye pretended not to see. Anna's face tightened, then smoothed. She had lived with this anticipation long enough to recognize its rhythm. The boy pressed his palms together beneath the table, breath quickening when the bell chimed despite the locked door. A customer turned away by weather and circumstance. The veteran spoke just enough, letting fragments drift into the open air of the diner, words shaped to travel. He mentioned delays, insurance letters that never came, a case that had once stalled. He kept his voice level, neither accusing nor afraid. He had a small device resting on the table, unremarkable, the sort that could pass for a key fob if one didn't look closely. He did not point to it. He did not announce it. He relied on the oldest rule he knew. People reveal themselves when they believe they are unseen. The door rattled. Snow blew in as it opened, white scattering across tile. The man stepped inside, stamping his boots, shedding the storm with practiced irritation. He was in his early 40s, broad through the shoulders, face sharp with a trimmed beard that tried to suggest discipline but could not hide the impatience in his eyes. His skin was weathered in the way of someone who spent time outdoors by choice, not necessity. He glanced around as if assessing a room that owed him something. When his gaze landed on Anna, it hardened, then softened into something almost rehearsed. "There you are," he said, voice pitched for concern. "I've been worried." Anna did not rise. She did not greet him. She held still, hands folded, eyes steady. The boy shrank, then felt Rex's flank press close and steadied again. Sarah moved behind the counter, posture alert, phone within reach but untouched. The veteran turned slightly, presenting an open profile, non-threatening. He nodded once. "Storm's bad," he said. "People get lost in weather like this." The man scoffed, brushing snow from his sleeve. "Accidents happen," he said, "too quickly, too often." He spoke of responsibility, of unfinished paperwork, of costs. He spoke as if the room were a ledger and Anna an entry out of place. The veteran listened and asked simple questions, the kind that invite correction. He mentioned timelines. He asked about the crash without naming it. He allowed silence to stretch until the man filled it, irritation pushing him forward. The man's jaw tightened. He talked about premiums and patience, about how winter thins people down, about how survival favors the prepared. Outside, the wind rose. Inside, the air sharpened. The veteran said nothing when the man leaned in, lowering his voice. He only angled his head as if to hear better. "She wouldn't let it go," the man said, not realizing he had shifted from performance to confession. Always asking questions, making it complicated. He laughed once, short and humorless. "Doors jam, metal bends, that's physics." The words hung there, unclaimed. Anna's breath caught. The boy stared at the table. Rex did not move. The veteran waited, then spoke with the calm of someone who had learned when to press. "You planned for that," he said, not a question. The man's eyes flicked to the door, to the windows, calculating exits that were now only snow. "I planned for winter," he said, and in the saying revealed everything. He added more, because people do when they think the world has already judged them. He spoke of leverage, of policies that pay when silence holds, of how storms cover tracks. Sarah's voice cut through, steady. "Sir," she said, hand on the counter, "you need to leave." The man laughed again, but the sound faltered. The veteran stood, not looming, just present. He did not touch the man. He did not threaten. He reached down and turned off the small device, the room suddenly louder for the absence of its quiet witness. Outside, sirens threaded the storm, blue and red diffused through snow. The man's face changed then, bravado draining to calculation, to something like fear. The veteran stepped aside, giving him space to choose his next words. He chose poorly. He repeated himself, trying to reframe, to soften. It was too late. When the officers arrived, boots crunching, breath steaming, the veteran met their eyes and stepped back. Anna did not move until the man was led away, shoulders hunched against more than cold. Only then did she sag, relief and shock warring. The boy reached for Rex's fur and held on. The storm continued its work outside, erasing prints. But inside the diner, the truth had already set its tracks. The night did not darken so much as it paled, snow reflecting the city back at itself until shadows felt washed thin and time lost its edges. Red and blue lights stitched color into the white, flashing against storefront glass and drifting flakes. The kind of light that announces decisions have been made. The veteran stood near the door, posture calm, shoulders squared without bravado, while Rex sat at his heel, sable fur flecked with melting snow, eyes steady on the threshold. The officers entered with purpose and restraint. Sergeant Linda Morales led them, early 40s, compact and athletic, black hair pulled into a tight braid beneath her winter cap, face lined not by age, but by nights like this one. Her voice carried authority without heat, the practiced balance of someone who had learned that control was the quickest way to keep a room from breaking. Behind her was Officer Ben Carter, younger, tall and broad with a soft jawline and earnest eyes that betrayed the weight of firsts still landing hard. Their boots left wet crescents on the tile. They listened. They watched. They asked for names and dates, and then, without spectacle, moved. The man who had once rehearsed concern now wore the rigid mask of someone calculating loss. Handcuffs clicked, metallic and final. Sarah leaned against the counter, one hand pressed flat as if grounding herself. Her gray bun had loosened, a few wisps escaping, skin flushed from adrenaline rather than heat. She met Morales's eyes and nodded once, gratitude without words. Anna sat very still. At 35, she carried a slender frame that the crutches made more apparent, shoulders narrow, brown hair cut to a practical length that brushed her jaw, eyes dark and watchful. Her face had learned caution the way others learn laughter. When the cuffs closed, her breath hitched and then released in a shudder she did not try to hide. The boy's reaction came faster. He stood abruptly, chair scraping, heart racing ahead of sense. 12, all elbows and knees under a too-big jacket, hair perpetually falling into his eyes. He scanned the room as if exits were traps. Morales crouched to his level, voice lowered. "We need to take care of some paperwork tonight," she said, choosing words that would not bruise. "You and your mom will be safe." The word safe landed wrong. The boy shook his head, breath stuttering, panic rising like a tide that had learned the path. "Temporary placement," Carter added gently, "until morning, until the system did what it needed to do." The boy's hands clenched, then released, then clenched again. Rex shifted closer, a warm wall of fur and calm, and the veteran felt the tremor pass through the leash into his palm. The veteran spoke then, not loud, not urgent. He did not contradict the officers. He offered context. He explained the storm, the closed roads, the lack of family nearby, the hours it would take for shelters to arrange beds. Morales listened, eyes flicking to the windows, where snow erased distance. She weighed options the way people do when rules meet weather. "One night," she said carefully, "if and only if there's supervision." Her gaze settled on the veteran, assessing the set of his jaw, the steadiness of his hands, the dog at his side. "And we document everything." That was when the boy moved. He stepped across the narrow space and took the veteran's hand. Not a tug, not a grab, a decision. His fingers were cold, grip firm with resolve he had not known he possessed until this moment demanded it. He looked up, eyes wet but clear. "Please," he said, voice breaking only once. "Can we stay?" The room went still, even Rex holding his breath. The veteran knelt, bringing himself down until their eyes met. He saw the fear, yes, but also the spark of agency, the first step toward choosing safety rather than being assigned to it. He did not promise what he could not give. He said, "We'll do this the right way," and waited for Morales's answer. Morales straightened, the braid at her back catching the light. She conferred quietly with Carter, radios murmuring, protocols bending just enough to hold. "One night," she repeated, firmer now. "We'll check in by morning." She handed Anna a card, then another to the veteran. "This is temporary," she said to the boy, meeting his gaze without flinching. "Temporary doesn't mean alone." As the cruiser doors closed on the man who had counted winters, the lights receded down the street, leaving the diner in its ordinary glow. Sarah poured coffee she did not drink. Anna leaned forward, elbows on the table, tears slipping free now that the danger had moved. The boy did not let go of the veteran's hand until Rex nudged his knee, reminding him that the world still held steady things. They left together. Outside, the snow softened sound, city reduced to breath and footfall. The veteran's truck waited, dusted white, heater already humming. He loaded crutches, checked doors, counted heads. Rex climbed in last, curling where he could watch everyone at once. As they pulled away, the boy exhaled, a long unspooling, and rested his forehead against the window. The white night swallowed the street behind them, but ahead the road was open, at least for now, and that was enough. Spring did not arrive all at once. It crept in quietly, loosening winter's grip the way healing loosens fear, slowly, unevenly, but unmistakably. Snow still lingered in shaded corners of the city, but sidewalks showed through, and sunlight lasted longer each afternoon. In a small rehabilitation clinic on the east side, Anna took her first careful steps with a prosthetic leg, sweat dampening the collar of her sweater as determination tightened her jaw. Anna, at 35, looked different now than the woman who had leaned on crutches in the diner months earlier. She was tall once you saw her upright, slender but stronger than her frame suggested. Her brown hair, now grown past her shoulders, was often tied back in a low ponytail, revealing a pale scar along her jawline from a long-ago fall that had taught her caution. Her skin carried the faint grayness of winters survived too hard, but color had returned to her cheeks. She was not fearless. Fear still visited her at night, but she no longer mistook fear for weakness. The prosthetist, Mark Ellison, was a compact man in his late 50s, with steel-gray hair and hands scarred by decades of precise labor. He spoke softly, never rushing, explaining pressure points and balance as if patience were part of the machinery. "Your body remembers," he told her, adjusting the socket. "We just reminded how." Anna nodded, jaw set, sweat on her brow not from pain alone, but from the effort of reclaiming ground she had lost. In the waiting room, the veteran sat with Rex stretched at his feet. The dog was 7 now, a German shepherd with a black and tan coat dulled slightly by age, one ear bearing a faint nick from his working days. Rex watched doors and people with the quiet vigilance of a soul that had learned responsibility early. His presence remained constant, a steady heartbeat against the chaos that had once defined the veteran's life. The veteran himself had changed in ways no mirror could show. The war had given him structure and scars, discipline and ghosts. He had come home knowing how to survive, not how to live. Responsibility once felt like a trap. Now it felt like gravity, something that held him in place. He wore a worn field jacket, beard trimmed but still rough at the edges. Lines around his eyes deepened not by anger but by attention. He noticed things now: the way Anna exhaled before stepping forward, the way Rex leaned subtly when the boy entered a room, the way quiet could be peaceful instead of dangerous. The boy, 12 going on 13, returned to school the week the sidewalks finally cleared. His name was Eli, a thin, sharp-featured kid with dark hair that never stayed combed and eyes that measured rooms instinctively. Trauma had made him observant. Safety was teaching him to be curious again. On his first morning back, he stood in the doorway longer than necessary, backpack clutched tight. The veteran knelt, adjusting the straps with hands that once disassembled. Rifles in the dark. "You don't have to be brave," he said evenly, "just honest." Eli nodded, swallowed, and stepped outside. School was not easy. There were whispers, questions asked too loudly, a teacher who spoke too gently. But there were also moments that mattered: a librarian who remembered his name, a classmate who shared notes, a counselor, Mrs. Helen Cho, small, sharp-eyed, hair streaked with silver, who spoke plainly and listened without interruption. She did not promise that everything would be fine. She promised consistency. For Eli, that mattered more. At home, evenings settled into rhythm. Dinner at 6. Homework at the table, Rex guarded like a post. Physical therapy exercises timed with the news. Laughter came unexpectedly, sometimes awkward, sometimes loud enough to startle them all. Anna learned to walk farther each week, the prosthetic becoming less an intrusion and more a tool. She learned its limits and her own, and neither frightened her anymore. There were setbacks. Phantom pain woke her at night. Eli had a panic attack when a car backfired on the street. The veteran found himself gripping the counter too hard when paperwork from the courts arrived. But they learned to pause together, to breathe, to name what was happening instead of running from it. On a clear afternoon in late March, they stood in the yard behind the veteran's modest house. The grass was still brittle, winter-worn, but green pressed through. Anna took several steps without thinking about them, then laughed when she realized what she had done. Eli was already planning a science project, talking too fast, hands moving as if ideas needed space. Rex lay in the sun, eyes half closed, content. The veteran watched them and understood something he had missed for years. Survival had kept him alive. Choice had given him a life. He had not rescued them in the way movies liked to pretend. They had chosen one another, day after day, through therapy appointments and school mornings and quiet dinners. Family, he realized, was not declared in moments of crisis alone. It was built in ordinary hours when no one was watching. As evening cooled the air, Anna rested a hand on the veteran's arm. It was not a grand gesture. It did not need to be. Eli leaned against Rex, who thumped his tail once, satisfied. The winter that had brought them together no longer felt cold. It felt like the season before something good. Sometimes God doesn't send a miracle. Sometimes He sends a person. A hand that stays. A door that opens. A table that isn't taken away. If this story touched you, ask yourself, who might God be asking you to notice today? Comment if you believe kindness is a miracle. Share this story with someone who needs hope. Subscribe for more stories of faith and compassion. May God bless you, protect you, and guide your steps, even through the coldest seasons. Amen.